So this is one of the photos, folks. I shot. This is Randall Robinson dancing with his daughter Kalia. There was a New Year's Eve celebration, and so this is one of the photos I shot. And I just realized I shot so many. Y'all, I was shooting everything. I don't think I actually got a photo of me and Randall. I was shooting everybody else, but that's how it happens. And actually, part of the reason I'm also upset, I don't have any video because literally my backpack was stolen here in D.C. on a hard drive with all the videos. And other stuff was on there, but I do have a lot of the images, and so that was an absolute fun night we had, fun trip we had in St. Kitts, and so that's the image there of Randall and his daughter Kalia, who I met actually when she was a student at MIT when I spoke there for, I think it was an MLK program. Folks, my next guest is a member of the Commission of the National African American Reparations, pastor of Empowerment Temple AME in Baltimore. Reverend Robert Turner. Reverend Turner, glad to have you here. My panelists still with me, Julian Malveaux, Rita Shannon, Jason Nichols. I'm going to pull them in as well. Reverend Turner, I'll start with you. In Randall Robinson's book, The Debt, it was a trilogy of books. He talked about the idea of reparations, and he really explained it in a way that, again, wasn't solely about African Americans, but he laid out the narrative of the African diaspora and what America, but also the world, owes people of African descent.
Yes, and again, to echo Congress Lady Maxine Waters, Roland, thank you for highlighting this brother's life. What Randall Robinson did before the great work of Ta-Nehisi Coates in The Atlantic, before several other articles and books that have followed since 2000. Back in 2000, this brilliant mind of a man, Randall Robinson, wrote The Debt, and it literally transformed a generation and exposed scholars, students, and activists to empirical data on why reparations is not just some pie-in-the-sky ideal, but it is something you can put numerical value to. And he highlighted the harms, the gross negligence, and the reckless abandonment of the American government for centuries, not just before 1865, but even in subsequent years following, to current suffering through mass incarceration and other terrible policies that grossly impact the Black community.
And when he wrote those books, again, what he did was he connected the dots. And that's the thing I think a lot of people don't understand. By connecting the dots of Columbus not founding anything, frankly, I even talked about St. Kitts and other Caribbean nations, like people were already there when Columbus showed the hell up. So it's not like he, founded any of those countries, and how you had indigenous people who were there. He was an historian walking people through the history of our people.
Absolutely. And he was also well versed in church history. He highlights in his book when they were choosing the Pope that there was some discussion about it being the first one from Africa, and he noted that we've had already 2, possibly 3 popes born in the mainland African continent. So he was very well versed, and he connected the dots on so many levels, economically, religiously, politically, to Black history, Black thought. He was very well versed in Egyptian. The ideology of the Egyptians concerning the 12 months of the year that predates the Greek 12 months. They got it from us in Africa, in Egypt particularly. He was just an outstanding mind who was impervious to the apathy of mainstream America that really could care less about Black people or Black thought.
Julian, the book, folks, The Debt, show my iPad, please. It was called The Debt, What America Owes to Blacks. You see there was on the cover the quote there from now, of course, no longer exists, Emerge magazine, led by George Curry. Rest in peace, George. A tour de force, heartfelt and passion. And you really open a lot of people's eyes to the history of our people in this country. And I keep saying, connecting the dots.
Precisely, Roland. It was such an important book, but he was such an important man. I'm happy to see my brother, Robert Turner. We both serve on the National African American Reparations Commission. And that commission, of course, has been moving the work that Brother Robinson laid a foundation for, and so many others when we talk about reparations. I have so many fond memories of Randall Robinson, spending some time with him when he was fasting for Haiti, and going to his hotel room with my tape recorder. And he was fasting. He was committed. That's the kind of commitment we don't see. What is important about the Randall Robinson legacy is this. He was not like these ADOS people who say, oh, just we want to give reparations to only the descendants of enslaved people. He understood the notion of diaspora, of the ways that we're connected. The boat that landed in Virginia stopped in Haiti or stopped someplace else. So these folks who want to say, let's have narrow reparations are not really looking at the way that the predatory capitalist United States and other Western countries exploited us all. Randall Robinson, his legacy, as I said, is just a treasure. His presence was incandescent. But even more importantly than that, what do we build on that? Trans-Africa survived for another decade after his transition. I was on the board for a couple of minutes, and Bill Fletcher, of course, succeeded Randall. But who could succeed Randall? I mean, who really could? We are deficient when we don't lift up the notion of the African world. And I'll share one last thing. We were in, I forget where, someplace in Africa. I think we were in Ghana, a conference. He came and flew back. He came to speak and flew back. And I said, dude, are you going to hang out? He's like, no, I got to go right back. That was his commitment. He literally did a 24-hour turnaround to come and say a few words because he felt that the work was that important. When do we feel that that work is that important?
Jason Nichols, you teach this stuff. Your reflections on Randall Robinson.
You know, it brings me back to the college classroom where I first read The Debt. And, you know, what was so amazing about that was the discussion that it caused in the classroom. I mean, everybody was so engaged because, you know, for many of us, reparations, you know, though people have been talking about it for generations, for a lot of us college students, black, white, and otherwise, this was our first, you know, exposure to that idea. And when we, you know, of course, read the statistics that he put out there, I think the debt he said was $6 trillion at the time, if I'm not mistaken. I could be, that was a long time ago. But, you know, and us going back and forth, and I remember going home and having the discussion with my dad and saying, you got to read this book, and this is what, this is what Randall Robinson is saying, and he had his opinions and his ideas about it. And it just really was one of those moments that made me want to do what it is that I do, that made me basically never leave the classroom, because it was like one of those moments where it sparked your mind and it made you think and it made you reason, and everyone was having these really fruitful discussions about what the future should look like. And that's what education is all about, particularly in Black studies. So he was a big influence upon me, and I know upon many of my classmates, and of course many of my colleagues. So he's definitely a special figure in a lot of our minds because of the discussions that he raised. And of course, his advocacy for South Africa before that was so incredibly important, particularly for college students and people on university campuses. It really was, after, of course, the 60s and the 70s, it was one of those times where people, particularly Black students, got really engaged on college campuses. So that, of course, is something that we try to carry forward today, and we try to mentor students to be engaged in the world around them, and even places that they may never see in their lifetime, to be concerned about humanity. And that's what Randall Robinson kind of represents to me, just an intellectual giant and someone who engaged young people, and one of those young people at one point was me.
Renita?
Yes, as you know, I won't repeat what everybody else has said, but Randall Robinson was such an icon, from his work to standing against apartheid to supporting reparations. It just really shows the impact that one person can have, you know, by themselves, really being committed to the principles that you believe in. And he really was a one of the greatest thinkers, I would say, for Black people on these issues. One of the things that stood out to me about him was the way he talked about how white supremacy influences policy, and that being one of the reasons that he decided to move abroad. That's still a conversation that is relevant today and not something that people think a lot about, but it's one of those things that, really just sort of gets you to investigate a little more some of the things that we take for granted every day. And I don't think that is regularly connected enough, that so much of policy still is written for the people who have been able to vote the longest, which is white men in this country. And so I'll be forever grateful for the work that he did and the conversations that he sparked. And we've lost a giant.
Robert, final thoughts.
I'm challenged. I'm motivated. I'm inspired by the life of Randall Robinson. It hurts when you think about who we lost as a person. Thankful we still have his treasure in his work, his book that I still read on a regular basis. But I'm also troubled by the fact that we have lost so much of what we had from, as you stated, the emerge from the organization that he had found. We are really in great need as a community to support our own institutions. So I'm happy to see the hoodie you have on Dillard University and support our own networks. Because if we're not careful, if we continue to lose what we have, the things that people like Randall Robinson built, we won't have much left for my kids, my two boys, to even be a part of.
Indeed, Reverend Robert Turner, we're still appreciative